My breaking news?
Your breaking news, yes.
It's really not that exciting, but I'll certainly share it. My personal breaking news is I'm off to Prague on Wednesday.
Ooh.
No.
Let's see. We don't have to deal with those. Okay, everyone. Thanks for getting on board. It is now 11 o'clock. Welcome to the Sunday brunch space with the Voice of San Francisco. I'm Mike Egge, your editor-in-chief. We are here today with correspondents Erica Sandberg and John Trasviña. Our fearless leader, Susan Dyer Reynolds, is still traveling and unfortunately unable to be with us today. But we have some interesting topics for you today. Most notably, we're talking about what is probably going to be in addition to the District 4 recall, the second most interesting topic of the coming election season, at least to discuss at this stage, which is judicial elections, because we have a potential state constitutional amendment regarding judicial elections, which is of some significant concern. And then we have the issue of the judicial elections themselves in San Francisco, which is why we brought John on board. John is just finished an op-ed, which is on our website right now. If you have not read it, I encourage you to do so. John, tell us a little bit about that piece and the issues behind it.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be with everyone this morning. We're undergoing an extraordinary attack on judges and on the judicial system, and since 1934, we've elected either upfront or retained California judges, Supreme Court, appellate judges, and our local Superior Court judges. It's right there in our Constitution. Superior Court judges shall be elected. Now, the State Assembly is considering a constitutional amendment, and a reporter I talked to said it's extraordinary that this is going forward with such little attention. The debate in front of the Assembly Elections Committee meeting last week, the hearing, was about 10 minutes, and the vote was 4-2 to move it forward to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. What this constitutional amendment would do, it would put on the ballot in 2026, taking away our automatic right to vote for the Supreme Court justices and appellate court justices. And if that goes through, it could then go down to the Superior Court. Right now, the governor appoints Supreme Court, the appellate court, also appoints most judges, even though we say they're to be elected. And then they go before the voters at the beginning of their term, at the end of their term, for a second term of a period of years. This constitutional amendment would say, let's not do that anymore. Let's require a set number of petitions and signatures in order to have an election. And if not enough people petition to have an election, then that judge is deemed elected. And the term deemed elected should not be in any democracy. It should scare anybody that the powers on the inside can just suddenly say, well, we're going to cancel all election. It costs too much. The voters don't know enough, etc. And those are the reasons that are being used in this very quiet process to change the Constitution.
Yeah, it certainly seems like they're trying to keep default justices with no scrutiny, which is kind of that seems rather sus, shall we say, in current parlance.
That's right. We've established that we have the right to vote for judges, and we've already given up the process at the beginning to put them on the bench. Mm-hmm. That we let the governor do. He's got a judicial selection advisory committee that Governor Newsom is the first governor to let the public know who's actually on that committee.
Right.
And then once the governor decides, I want to appoint this person, then it goes before the state bar committee, called the judicial nomination evaluation, and they do a lot of confidential questioning, asking people about the prospective nominee, and then they send it back to the governor with a rating. All of that is confidential, and then the governor makes his or her appointment. There's no role for the public in that process. And then now they're saying at the end of the process, after the judges are ruling, etc., we don't think you have enough information, and we're not going to do anything to give you information on judges. So we're going to take away your automatic right to vote, unless somebody is organized enough and wealthy enough to petition to have an election. Then you won't have an election, and they'll just be, as I say, deemed elected. That takes away the voice of the people entirely from the third branch of government.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed that is another recent development in the last few judicial elections is that apparently for the local judges, Superior Court judges, there won't be an election unless some attorney decides, oh, this guy isn't any good, so I'm going to run against him.
That's right. In that case, it depends upon the bravery of a local judge to, in effect, not the way it's structured in the civics books or in the Constitution. In the practical reality is, in effect, if you decide to run against an incumbent judge, you are taking on the Bar Association,
right,
the Chronicle, Aaron Peskin when he was on the board, and then all the other judges. Everybody circles around their colleague on the bench. And when people ran in the last cycle, there was all this uproar that people had the temerity to run. So you have people who run. Maybe they practice out of town, or they live out of town, or there can be a deputy DA might run, and that deputy DA will say, if I win, I'm on the bench. If I lose, I've got to go back in front of all these judges. Maybe I better become a deputy DA in San Mateo or Marin County or another place.
Right.
And that's the pressure that people have just to run. And if somebody doesn't run, then there's no election. They never appear on the ballot. So even though the California Constitution says Superior Court judges shall be elected, a Superior Court judge can go throughout his entire judicial career, his or her judicial career, without ever having to be subject to a vote by any member of the public. In the last cycle, when the judges, they all file for retention or re-election, there were 12 or 14 of them. I went around to a couple of groups that meet to talk about politics. They pride themselves from being on this board or having had this experience in City Hall. I said, so we got 12 or 14 of these judges running. Anybody know who they are? Not a person.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're a practicing lawyer in San Francisco, or you have some other reason to be at the course a lot, you're not going to know who the judges are. And that's fake democracy. It's not real democracy. What we need is for the judges to really promote education about what they're doing.
Yeah, I would agree. I sort of, in the 25 years or so that I've observed local politics, and one of the big issues that sort of came up in the beginning of that experience was judicial elections, because this is in the mid-90s. This is right after Willie Brown got elected mayor. A number of people who were sort of apparatchiks in the Democratic County Central Committee back then wanted to run for judge, including a former chair of the committee named Matthew Rothschild. And they basically just saw it as another political job. And, you had a number of people like Rothschild. There was another couple of court commissioners who were running for judge as well. People focused on Rothschild because he was kind of a political apparatchik, didn't really have any trial experience. He's always been in the city attorney's office. And so we, the club that I was a part of basically our board had a whole bunch of lawyers on it. It was mostly lawyers, former deputy DAs, etc. And our tack on it on judicial elections was that it should be treated the same way as a recall or an impeachment, as it were. That there's no need to vote there's no need to have a vote unless someone is standing up and saying that this judge is committing some kind of misconduct or doing something really wrong in their job. And that defense of the incumbents, most of whom were incumbent judges with good records, didn't really fly for the most part. Rothschild was made sort of a target, so he didn't win. But we've had, over time, in fact, from even earlier, we've had a legacy of progressives running against governor-appointed judges and winning, and thus politicizing the bench. And now that we've seen sort of the, shall we say, chickens come home to roost on that in terms of how the bench is performing, people are finally sort of activated about it and say, well, what's wrong with our judges? And now the progressive judges are giving this line saying, well, there shouldn't be a need for judicial elections unless someone is actually committing like real misconduct, et cetera, that kind of thing. So it's an interesting turnaround that I see. One of the judges that I think people are going to be talking about in local elections next year is Gerardo Sandoval. And he's sort of an interesting case study in this because he got elected to the bench from the board. He served 2 terms on the Board of Supervisors. He was one of the progressive supervisors that was elected in 2000. And to give you an idea of what kind of a supervisor he was, he represented District 11. And just to give you an idea, so Asha Safai, the late supervisor who just got termed out, he was principal sponsor of 71 ordinances and 99 resolutions on the Board of Supervisors. John Avalos, who was his predecessor, who was significantly more to the left than him, was the author of 97 ordinances and 150 resolutions. Gerardo Sandoval was the author of 70 ordinances and 341 resolutions. He was well known for showing up on Vox News and arguing that America should not have its own Navy. He would show up on Hannity and Colmes, which was this typical Fox News news program where the liberal person is always the weak person, so they bring up the weak, pokeable liberal person to make fun of, and he was one of these guests that would serve that purpose, and say outrageous things like America should not have a Navy and so on. And within the first term of his office, he got criticism when he was involved in a sort of debate over whether or not the city should pay off these settlements against corporations over corporate taxes. He was debating Aaron Peskin while being progressives, being sort of the fiscal pragmatist, and Sandoval being the dyed-in-the-wool progressive. And during this debate, Sandoval makes reference to the people who run corporations and how they get together and scheme against progressive agendas at their bar mitzvahs, which is unfortunately something which sort of stuck with him at least during the first 4 years of his term there. So much so that a certain moderate political consultant, who I will not name, actually sent out some flyers with swastikas on them in order to try and remind people of his remark, and that may have actually blown up in his face. But he was not the brightest of supervisors. He was probably one of the most performative and least effective members of the Board of Supervisors. and he had nowhere to go. He thought about running for assessor. There were other people running for it, and the powers that be let it be known that there was no room for him there. So he ran for judge and begged for endorsements and got elected as judge. And he's been on the bench since probably 2008. Again, ran against an appointee, Thomas Mellon, who didn't really have any complaints against him other than the fact that he was appointed by a Republican. And, since then, especially recently, he's gotten criticism over some decisions he's made in a couple of cases involving, let's see, I have a couple of them here. But maybe, Erica, you've followed these cases at all, or?
I have, yeah. In fact, SF Public Safety News has been following it pretty closely. If you go on to X, it's at SF_safety news. And they did a really good write-up as to what this judge has been, how he has been affecting fentanyl dealers, traffickers. He's been, basically a very, very light hand on how he is dealing with the dealers. And it's pretty egregious. If you take a look at the situation, first of all, he was rated as unqualified by the Bar Association.
Yeah, that was back when he first ran for judge. That's another thing I forgot to mention.
Right. That's right. And that's, if that's not a red flag, I certainly don't know what is. You sort of need to be qualified. Also, we desperately do need to hold fentanyl dealers to account and keep them. The cops can arrest, the DA can prosecute, then the judge's sentence. So what happens? Where are we falling behind? What's the problem here, right? We are really ramping up our attention on these dealers who really need to be behind bars or leave the country, because we have a very serious overdose rate. They cause a lot of mayhem and terrible situations in our communities. So why is it that a judge like Sandoval is letting them go? Because that's what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, some of these arguments are used to say we shouldn't have the right to vote, and I don't agree with that. I think we do need to have the right to vote. You can take up Gerardo Sandoval, you can take up others. The person he ran against, Tom Mellon, was there a coincidence that Tom Mellon was a household name in San Francisco? Not his name, but his father's name. So we've had political, with a small p, political judges, politically appointed because they're close to the governor, they're close to the governor's law partner, et cetera, for decades, if not longer. We have problems in we have different processes in other places, like in Illinois. You run as the Democratic candidate, you run on the Republican slate to be a judge, and that's not just Chicago politics. That's throughout the state. In Alaska, there's a very strong and effective way for people to be educated about the incumbent judges and anybody who is running.
Well, yeah,
same as in Arizona. So it's really not the process. It is what are we doing about educating people about the judges, and I think that is critically important. Right now, we could vote out judges if we want to, if we're able to. The problem here is that if we don't, and because we don't, people want to take away the right to vote.
The problem with of course, we need to vote in really good judges. I think that's important. But, even way back when I would see their names on the ballot, it wouldn't have occurred to me when I was younger to dig into their past and to see what they've, what their history is. So, and we're sort of battling that. We're battling ignorance, and it's just what people do. These ballots can be very long and arduous to get through. So it's I mean, it's a problem. It's an intrinsic problem with the process. But I do want to stress, and I am going to point fingers, but I do want to stress what it's important to people here in San Franciscans and outward, how serious this is, how incredibly serious this is. So I will read straight from the that Twitter account. An admitted fentanyl trafficker labeled as a very grave danger to the public by a San Francisco judge after twice being caught with enormous quantities of the drug was released by the same judge just days later.
Yeah.
Who was that judge?
Gerardo Sandoval.
It was Sandoval. So is justice being served? If we want people to serve time and actually have an accountability for their actions, this is not happening. Now, this guy, it was a woman. It was Daniela Hernandez Barahona, arrested after a search of her home. 5 pounds of fentanyl. 5 pounds. I don't know if you have seen the amount of fentanyl that an average user uses, but it's a tiny little amount. It could fit on half a dime. Okay. Now I want you to picture what 5 pounds looks like. That is enormous. This isn't just your everyday person who's out there slinging fentanyl for their own use. This is major trafficking. Why was this person just let go?
Yeah, there's a couple of I think there's at least 3 cases that he's been involved in that have gotten some fairly negative attention. There's another one that sort of involves retail theft. Someone who had been involved in engaging in some flash mobbing retail theft had gotten arrested, and as it turned out, he had priors for some significantly more violent crimes. And under recently passed laws, should have been hit with a harder sentence. And Sandoval basically just sort of ended up having him released. So again, I think you get a situation where establishments get very, very comfortable with their surroundings and, aren't being challenged by the public to, do the public good, which it's not the same perspective that I had, 20 years ago about judicial elections. And it's an interesting turnaround given what's happened.
There's much greater need for scrutiny during the election and between elections. So the sentencing practices, it's not just one judge, it's a lot of judges. And part of the reason it's a lot of judges is because our state legislators up in Sacramento have passed bills that allow for various types of release, that allow for various types of diversion, and we don't pay attention to those either, or we're not allowed in to really pay attention to those things. So there is a need to understand: is this a DA? Is to the extent that we have real problems with the criminal justice system. Is this a police problem? Are they not doing the job? Well, somebody's being arrested. Is it the DA's problem? Or is the DA properly presenting the case? In this case, it sounds like the DA probably presented the right case and got a conviction. And then is it the judge that slacks, or is it or are the state legislators passing laws that say this is less of a crime than it used to be, or the proper sentence is this? So it's a combination of things between the elections that the judges just don't really do a really good job of educating the public, and they have public outreach efforts. Those usually go to school kids, or they go to international visiting judges. They don't engage with the public. They say on their part, and the Chronicle repeats this, and others repeat this, saying, well, judges can't talk about pending matters. Well, retired judges can talk about pending matters. Retired judges can explain to the public why this case is happening, why that case is happening between the elections. And then when the judges come up, then the judges can talk about their records. I was involved with a group, and we went to the judges who were considering running or who were up in 2024. We say, "You're up. You're potentially before the voters. What are the voters supposed to think about when they decide whether you should get a second term?" And this is, after all, this second term belongs to the people. The governor gets to appoint them to the bench originally. That's the governor's term of putting somebody on. But after that, it belongs to the voters. Back in 1934, when we adopted the system, the state promised the voters always have the ultimate authority. The ultimate veto on the governor's choice belongs to the voters. Now it's like, oh, you can't touch it. You don't know enough about politics. You don't know enough about the judiciary. You don't know enough about the judges. You can't look at any of these cases. And they cast the people aside. So when we have a need, as we do today, to defend the judiciary, because at the federal level, the president is running roughshod over the judiciary as well as the legislative branch, the judges should not be as distant as they are from us. They need to be able to come forward and talk about not so much a pending case before them, but they need to at least tell us. So when you persuaded the governor to appoint you, what'd you tell the governor? And what was your record then? That can be done. That's done at the federal level. When somebody is appointed to the federal court, their entire questionnaire is made public. That's what we should have here. That would help inform voters as to whether the judges, what they've promised, what their qualifications are, and yet we're going in the direction of making it harder for people to get information about judges and making it harder for them to be able to vote intelligently. So they say, well, you don't need to vote anymore. That's what's at stake with Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8. It was voted on last week by the Assembly Elections Committee. Fortunately, our own local member of the Assembly, Catherine Stefani, who's a member of that committee, she did not vote for it. She withheld her vote for it. And I hope going forward that she will be hearing from San Franciscans, as well as Matt Haney, who's on the Assembly Appropriations Committee, where the bill goes to next. Hope they hear from San Franciscans as to why ACA 8 is a bad idea.
So hopefully we can get that kicked into the suspense file, in other words.
Put it where it belongs, which is in the suspense file, and then get the judges and the bar associations and civic groups and the media to start publicizing what the judiciary is about in general and what judges are doing in particular.
It's amazing. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Eric.
I do think it's a really good idea for people to turn their attention to what the judges are doing and how they are ruling, what kind of sentencing they are handing down. And once you do, you'll sort of get addicted to it because it's, you start realizing where the gaps are. As I say, SFPD can do all the work that they can do. The district attorney's office can do all the work that she can do. And then when it reaches this level, when it reaches the point of, okay, well, what's going to happen next? Really take a look at what the judges are doing because they are responsible for what happens afterwards. And it's pretty alarming. And so, yes, we can, it's really important to vote in really good, as good of a judge as possible who matches what you think is what justice is all about. But once they're on the bench, review it, read it, understand who's making these determinations. And some of them have really egregious records. You've got failing grades from a couple from Stop Crime Action. Judge Patrick Thompson has been particularly bad. Judge Michael Beggart has been super problematic. And we're talking about cases, sex offenders, and really, really bad crimes. And very soft sentencing. So to really take a look at what they're doing, because the buck stops there as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I wonder, unfortunately, I wonder about, because we all remember what happened with Thompson and Beggart. They were able to put up fairly decent defenses for themselves despite the egregious cases on their records. They were able to put out, on balance, what seemed to members of the public, I guess, to be an acceptable record.
I got to tell you, I don't think it's so much that they did such a great job getting the word out and stating their case and fighting for their jobs. I really think it's a matter of what I just said before, which is people look on the ballot and they're like, oh, well, this guy was on the bench before, it's been on that, I'm sure it's fine.
Right.
All of that.
Yeah, I'm sure that has a lot to do with it, but I think it's also the fact that these people are just inured to the current political climate and how it affects people on the bench. It's just, they accept this climate, and then when they, they're among the last to realize that it's blowing up in their face, because the public at large suddenly gets a realization when they see the news of certain high-profile crimes, and they're finally tired of this. They finally get tired of this. They finally see something needs to change. So,
and by then it's late, unless there is a sustained effort to educate people about what's going on. And definitely the answer is not taking away our right to vote.
No,
absolutely not.
If this was coming up in North Carolina, Louisiana, Texas, we'd say, oh, there they go again. That would never happen here. Well, now it's happening here, and it's something that people need to be aware of.
Yeah. Let's keep the right to vote, obviously, but the information that is disseminated during elections needs to be a lot better, much better than what it is. And so far it hasn't been very good.
It's a struggle getting information out in ways that people want quick information.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want the result, which isn't always the right answer either. I mean, they don't sit through the trial. They don't understand. They don't get access to all the evidence. So they may say, "Oh, this should have been this way," when it's a legitimate reason to go another way.
Yeah. Indeed.
Absolutely, it's really tough. I mean, once again, that probably shows why it's really important to have a really good media outlet that is just kind of sticking to the facts and trying very, very hard not to be biased. And that's where we come in, right?
That's where we certainly endeavor to come in.
Yeah, the Voice of San Francisco, this is what we do. Please subscribe. It's really important. Get this information and share it with people.
Yeah. So I guess one other interesting little tidbit that's come up in past judicial elections is that there's actually a website that rates judges, and not necessarily from the public concern, public safety perspective, but from the concern of other attorneys that have to work with these judges. And it's called the Robing Room. And you can occasionally see some very, very, very catty and interesting reviews of certain judges all over the place, including San Francisco, on this website. So far, Judge Sandoval has a 1-star rating.
We shouldn't laugh, but if you don't laugh, you'll weep. It's really bad. Yeah.
So I guess we can sort of shift over. We'll probably have some people, some of our listeners, come in and comment about it if they want to. And meanwhile, I'm losing my do I have any speakers requesting to comment? Not yet. Okay, so let's. I think, Erica, you wanted to talk about a certain other aspect of the criminal justice system, or former aspect of the criminal justice system, and
crime, and more crime. Yeah,
exactly.
I think we're actually doing pretty well in San Francisco when it comes to violent crime. It's low. It's definitely relatively low. We have seen a massive change in smash and grabs. We do not have the same sidewalk glass that we used to see all the time. It's a really big positive difference. So I think that's really great. What continues to be an issue is people who've got mental illness and substance use issues who are kind of doing these. You know what? I'm setting the stage, but how about if I just present what I just recently saw on my own street? I was walking to Union Square and I saw a delivery guy, he was delivering food, DoorDash, I think. And out of nowhere comes this woman, and she tries to steal the food. I live in a nice neighborhood. It's an uphill. This woman grabs the food from the guy who's struggling with it, and then she
oh my God,
stalks him, and he's still struggling, and she's screaming, and it's this big to do, and I didn't know what to do. Everything happened so fast, and he managed to keep the bag of food away from her, and she goes tearing down the street, and she's still screaming, and she's got arms flying and whatnot. And I see the guy deliver the food and get into his car and then leave. So I was just thinking about this. You know, did a crime occur? Yes. Was that reported in any way? No. If it were me, would I have stopped and called 911? Yes. But this woman was already down the street. But I mean, if I were the delivery driver, these are the kind of things that do happen. They just do. These kind of random, and you know, I'm sure it happens in every city. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but it really struck me at that moment that there are so many similar things that happen that are just, they just never make it to our statistics. And it's really frustrating to me because we want to be able to believe the data that is disseminated, and a lot of it just goes unrecorded. And what I will say at this moment, which is, please, if something like that does happen to you, at least call the police and kind of take that next step so it does fall into the numbers, because we do need to have that information. That is the kind of information that helps us build our police ranks. So if you're frustrated but we don't have enough cops, make sure that all of the things like that happen are recorded. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a tremendous amount of sense. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
and I really felt for that guy, you know, because like here he is just trying to deliver food. God knows, I don't know how much they make, but that's just horrifying.
Yeah, it is, and I think that unfortunately is another aspect of policy that people don't normally associate with criminal justice. That's part of the problem, I think,
yeah.
Or at least one of the problems. But didn't you say you had some interesting observations about what was going on with the Trump administration and Alcatraz?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is the episode on crime right now. The funny, and I'll just say it's funny, move to turn Alcatraz back into a prison. Okay, I'm just going to ask both of you guys. What do you think? What do you think, this is going to happen or not happen? Where would you put your money?
I would walk out of the casino right away and call the fire department. You think
it's likely to happen?
The first, yeah, very unlikely to happen. It's also part of we currently have a president who is being called on the carpet for any number of things. And he is pulling all sorts of random ideas for distractions out of his head. And I tend to think this Alcatraz is one of this whole Alcatraz idea is one of them. You know, it simply can't be done. I mean, our own Connie Chan, God bless her, at least this time, is actually putting forth legislation to keep them from expanding Alcatraz's bathroom capacity or something like that if they do try to manage doing it. But the reality is that, you know, the midterms are coming. Trump's time is over 2 years after that. This is not going to come to fruition. We will always have Alcatraz as our wonderful tourist attraction. I don't think it's going anywhere from that.
No.
I agree with Mike that any action will take a long, long time. But as I said earlier, perhaps it would be a post administration home for the first family.
Yeah, that's just about, if they tried to turn everything back on there, that's about the size of a cohort of that they could, that's the maximum size that they could probably accommodate.
And just let's take a look at what, even if it were to start, but what the cost would be. I don't know if you guys have been to Alcatraz lately. I used to go all the time with my child for school trips and, tourists in town, and you go. It's a crumbling mess. It's wonderful to visit. I think it's completely fascinating, but it's a deteriorated set of buildings that I cannot even imagine the effort it would take. And their estimate, I think the lowball estimate for what it would take to turn it into a prison is $500 million, which is really hilarious because that's just bizarrely low. You could barely build a regular building like that here in San Francisco for that much. And then I think that the other reports...
Our new high schools are going to cost $1 billion.
There you go. Right. Up to $2 billion. But even that, I think, is absurdly low. There's just no feasible way, and we don't have the money for it. It's just not going to happen. And how long would it take? What, are we going to get it up in a couple of years? Not even close. So, and we start looking at the practicalities of this, and there's just no way. But what it does is that it takes your eye off the ball. It's kind of like, look, squirrel. Mm-hmm. Right? So here we had all of this attention on this, and it just kind of, it's a deflective measure. And it's, could it be good? Could it be good for San Francisco in terms of just as a funny thing to chat about and to discuss over beers? Sure. But that's about it.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I kind of wish we had a little bit more to chat about this current administration. But I on one level, it seems kind of anticlimactic now that the Epstein stuff seems to be seeping out, and the polls and the approval ratings are such that it's basically it's like playing one of those stupid zombie games that you see advertised on YouTube, and then it crashes and you're just sort of waiting for the big zombie to fall down and die. Yeah. But anyway, we'll see what happens. Needless to say, that doesn't mean that people should be complacent. But
I do think that there's something really positive about this, which is because it is a topic of conversation, a national and international topic of conversation. It shines a light on San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed with San Francisco. So I think it sparks interest in the city, and it may actually turn out to be something positive for us, where we have, we've become a little bit more stimulating and a little bit more interesting than we have in the recent past. We certainly could use more tourists. I don't see a whole lot around. It's summer. And we're not seeing the mobs of people. I talk to Uber drivers and taxi drivers all the time, and they're saying, people aren't here. So maybe this has some
interesting,
a nice little side effect. Just interest in the city.
Interesting. So I think we could probably, if some of our listeners want to come on, ask to speak and have any comments about this, we could go ahead. We've got some time left. In the meantime, if either of you have any other, John, do you have any other observations about either Alcatraz or judicial elections?
I'm sure there's a tie-in somewhere. that Voice of San Francisco readers will be able to come up with.
Indeed. Okay. Well, in that case, I think I'm going to relate a story of my last big jury duty experience that actually involved one of the people who ran for a judicial election that my Democratic club had to make a decision on back when I first started being a political observer. And it was a very unusual case, and it was a murder case. It basically involved a gentleman who was a former merchant seaman who inherited a bunch of money and basically just sort of became sort of a lollygag, spending his inheritance, living off of his inheritance, and being the man about town within the scope of his former experience as a merchant seaman based out of San Francisco. He had a girlfriend that he was having problems with, who was also a bartender at a local bar in North Beach that some of you may remember. It was the Vinny, quote unquote, lucky spot called back then. It was on Stockton Street. And the bar, in fact, is still there. And one day he came in, probably not quite settled an argument with her he had earlier, and shot her in the face, laid the gun down on the bar, and walked out. And this particular trial was a retrial after a mistrial, which we didn't find out about until after it was all over. Because if you shoot someone in a bar and that bar is filled with drunk people, you're basically taking the various vagaries of eyewitness testimony and turning it into sort of a Rashomon on fleek, as it were, where everyone has very, very different recollections, or possibly even no recollections of what actually happened, even though it was a few feet away from their faces. And that's what we sort of experienced going through this. I ended up being an alternate because, I had asked, should I be on this case? And I asked several questions while filling out the questionnaire for this, because at the time I worked for the San Francisco Daily Journal. I wasn't a journalist; I was in the advertising department, but still worked for the Daily Journal, which is one of our legal newspapers in town. I was a program chair of a Democratic club that had endorsed the sitting judge's candidacy for judge at the time. Was that a reason for getting me for excluding me from this trial? Was the fact that because I worked for the Daily Journal, I was very aware of the controversies around the wife of the current defense counsel, who is also a defense attorney and just recently been disbarred. So no, it doesn't make any difference. You're going to be on the jury. So here I was on the jury, albeit as an alternate, having to listen through the entire case, which of course is very sad. This person, the defendant's story, is quite sad because shortly after he inherited all this money, he discovered that he had cancer, and this is one of the things that affected his mental state. And sort of the deteriorating relationship between him and his girlfriend that seemed kind of one-sided in many ways, because he apparently had a lot of money and was dying. And this whole thing about the dynamics of the people who go to this bar every day and are the kind of people that hang out at bars in the middle of the day while someone comes in and shoots someone in a few feet away from you. And so we were hearing all of these very tragic stories, and the defense attorney, being the kind of defense lawyer that he was, God knows we'd never want him to be a judge. He basically questioned every single, he cross-examined every single witness and tried to basically, depose every single point, to the point where, the judge was starting to Mr. Gretsch, what are you doing? You know, that kind of thing in the middle of the trial. And try to ignore the last name that I meant that I said there of the attorney's name. But you know, so by the end of this all happens during the first part of the case where the prosecution is making their case. Prosecution is presenting their case, and all of this is happening during cross-examination. And so after a couple of weeks of this, it's time for the defense to present their case. Defense lawyer puts the defendant on the stand and asks him some background questions about where he's from, how long he's lived in the city, his current situation with his cancer, you know, what he's been doing, that kind of thing. And then in a very, very sympathetic tone, asked, "Did you kill this person?" And then after a few pauses, the defendant says, "Yes." At which point the defense lawyer looks like he's about to have a heart attack. It was clear that he had not planned for this. And so all of a sudden, you know, that day's proceedings were called into recess early, and then we sort of got we're going to have to try and, look at a plea bargain case now that or some kind of situation where he's because he's essentially confessed to the crime. And because I was an alternate, I didn't stay around for that part. Lo and behold, the next election season was coming, and Bill Fazio was running for DA, and all of Bill Fazio's kitchen cabinet were hanging out in his office and talking about things. And I walk in, and one of the lawyers immediately points to me and says, "Yeah, and he was right there when it happened."
Wow.
So that was the last jury duty service I had in San Francisco.
That sounds very dramatic.
Yes.
You know, it's funny. I've never actually served on a jury. I have always wanted to. I came very close, but it never happened.
If anyone from the Superior Court is listening,
yeah, bring me up. I used to have a friend who was a parole officer, and I tell you, if you want to sit next to somebody interesting at a party, try and choose a parole officer. But I remember she was saying that she used to be on the unfortunately, she served for years doing domestic violence and crimes against children. And so she would ask the guys, and she said she always asked, and she was very bold, and she said, I always ask them, so did you do it? Did you strangle your wife? Did you sexually abuse your kids? What did you do? Did you do it? And they would say, she's like, after, years and years of this, she said, not one single person said yes. Like, no, absolutely not. I was framed. I mean, what? Are you crazy? Of course not. My God, she was a liar, blah, blah, blah. And she said then she was transferred over to the gang unit. And she said, the first time I started asking, kind of a different answer. So, did you kill that guy? Hell yeah, I did.
Amazing.
It was really a funny change, in terms of responsibility.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any interesting jury duty experiences or experiences with jurors, for that matter, John?
Well, I've been on a few juries, both here in San Francisco and also in Washington D.C. And we really need good jurors because the system is dependent upon it, and jurors ultimately have a big say, even more than judges. There's the process of overturning a jury verdict, but that's very, very difficult. So I'd say for the most part, I've really when I practice and you noted earlier about deputy city attorneys, I actually had trial experiences as a deputy city attorney, and I was always impressed with the jurors and the way I came across and the other attorney came across. You can get a lot of insights as to people, and I've always felt the jury process, even though everybody loves to get off it. Nobody wants to get a card in the mail saying, you've been picked for jury duty. But ultimately, you need to be there, which is why we need to have a better vision on what's going on in these cases. What are the judges doing? Who are they? And all of that. We all have responsibilities as voters. We have responsibilities to know what's on the ballot. But the process, the people who are running the elections need to make it a little bit more accessible to us. One of the disappointing things I found on this ACA 8 legislation is that the League of Women Voters thinks it's a good idea. They say, well, we've been trying to educate people about voters for years and we can't do it. So, or rather educate people about judges, and we haven't been able to do it, so they've kind of given up.
Okay, well, yeah, something is definitely wrong there.
Yeah, and Common Cause that fights for democracy. It's they're all over their website about defending democracy. Now, we've throughout our history in the Constitution, we've always expanded liberty. We've expanded the right to vote. We went from appointment of U.S. senators to election of U.S. senators. We've gone to expanding the people who can vote from white property-owning men to women, to all races, no property requirement, to people who are age 18 instead of age 21. We've always expanded the right to vote. And now we come across, we're just throwing up our hands saying, oh, well, we can't figure out about judges, so just let them go through with this process where if you petition for them, then you can have an election, but otherwise you can't have an election. So this is a big step in our democracy, ACA 8, and it's a step backwards rather than forward. So I hope people do start paying attention to this bill that's percolating in Sacramento. It'll ultimately, if it passes in the Assembly, it'll go over to the Senate, where Scott Wiener obviously has a big voice in the state Senate, and I hope people here in San Francisco let him know what we think of losing our right to vote.
That's actually a good idea. I think people should probably talk to Scott and say, because unfortunately Scott has as much as he loves housing, he apparently loves criminals as well. So you may need to talk to him about that.
Okay, well, I want to say goodbye to both of you. Thank you so much for having me, as always, and for listening. I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, so.
Well, enjoy yourself in Prague.
Thank you. And if anybody has any suggestions about where to go and what to do and what to eat, please reach out to me. I'm always eager for suggestions. Have a great rest of the summer. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, Erica.
And I guess that's about it. I think the real question, I guess the only other observation I'd make about the situation with judicial elections and trying to change the system is on a political tactical level, above and beyond the whole rights, responsibilities and procedure and what's the right thing to do level is, people who keep trying to change the procedural rules to their, because one side has the advantage from it and you don't want them to have that advantage, sooner or later it blows up in your face, because I think, those rules were put there for a reason, and you could also take advantage of them. And, a few years down the line when the political cycle changes, this is very akin to, say, the filibuster in Congress, sure.
That's
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And every time Rob Bonta sues the administration, that also means that, and that means that the Attorney General of Louisiana, Texas, North Carolina can sue a Democratic administration. So, kind of like we have to worry about what we get. There's an issue of whether the states can control the federal government or not. And some people will say, yeah, that's great, but always know that the tool and the power can be wielded by others. So. If we get a Trump-like governor in California, who then puts all these judges on the bench that kowtow to him, we're gonna lose our state. It's gonna be a lot more difficult to get them out. One of the issues that came up, the reasons why the Republican member voted against this on the committee, she said, she said, it sounds perfectly reasonable to say we're going to have petitions in order to have an election. But what if the petitions are so high that it's basically going to nullify an election or not have it?
Exactly.
So things go both ways, and people need to be careful the power they give up, because once you give up your right to vote, I don't think you're going to get it back.
Yeah, that's true. That's the way it usually is. Well, anyway, this has been a relatively short broadcast today, and I keep hallucinating them on the radio instead of Twitter. You'll have to, someone send me some hate mail for that, please. But thank you very much for coming on and listening. Thank you, John, for contributing your experience and wit and wisdom. And everybody have a great summer. Have a great Sunday. And if you have not subscribed already to our newsletter at thevoicesf.org, please go over to our website and do so. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so our independent journalism needs your support as well. So thanks very much, and have a great Sunday.